Buchanan, Clickable divs and other icebergs.
So I'm going to begin just with a quick note. I do obviously have images and code in my slides. For those who can't read those, the code, I'll try and describe what it does. The actual syntax isn't particularly important for this talk, although I can share it later on if people want it. And similarly, the images can be largely treated as alt equals 2 quotes, and just don't worry about it. You're not missing anything critical. So with that said, you know what would be really cool is if I turn my clicker on. They work a lot better when you switch them on. Icebergs. Why did I talk about icebergs today? A lot of the issues we talk about in accessibility, we talk about the simplest representation of them, and that can be taken as a trivialization. So anyone who's been doing it long enough to remember explaining over and over again why you would use strong and M, not B and I tags in HTML. It's not because we were obsessed with emphasizing things, although in those conversations we probably were bolding a lot of things. It's because they are a neat representation of a much bigger thing, tips of icebergs. And the iceberg I'm going to get into today is unpacking something that you've probably heard other people referring to, which is you see developers will take an element that doesn't have functionality and they'll add it to it. So the typical, the reduced case is to take a div and add a click event. And the iceberg that this is really telling you about is that the developer has a lack of understanding about the DOM, or perhaps they had a lack of time. Maybe they don't understand semantic markup or an accessibility. If you're unlucky, they don't care. But it's more likely that they are just simply naive about the depth of the DOM. So we think of the DOM as being fairly simple because we take markup and we turn it into a markup tree that we render out to the browser. We also render it out, obviously, to the accessibility tree. And these are reduced views, but the actual DOM node has all kinds of stuff attached to it, has all kinds of behaviors, and interactive elements have had a lot of work put into them to basically give them superpowers. You use a tiny amount of code and you get a lot of functionality. And yet, to this day, jQuery's own docs immediately show this is how you do it. Attach a click event to a paragraph. I really don't know what the use case is to click a paragraph. I don't know what they were doing. And the flow-on effect of tutorials and the code that people see when they start learning something is that that's how they form their view of what this technology does, what you should use it for. We have a really interesting skills gap coming up now in technology. And it comes from the fact that when people don't know something, they go to tutorials. But tutorials assumed that you knew things before you went there. So tutorials are also written for their simplest form. So I want to teach you how to attach a click event, so I'm going to show you how to click a div because I don't want you to be distracted. There is a logic to that. But the problem is that the justification behind that logic is they already know HTML. I'm not going to spend time teaching them the fundamentals. I'm teaching them a new framework. So it doesn't matter that this is invalid. It doesn't matter that this is essentially terrible HTML. Because they'll know, all right? And people took that as a convenient truth. But the industry has had a really interesting shift. Until a few years ago, if someone knew JavaScript, you could reasonably safely think they knew HTML and CSS. And I know this because I've been recruiting people for a long time, and I've seen this shift, and it dropped sharply about 2 or 3 years ago. You can no longer assume they know HTML and CSS. We have a lot of different pathways. We have developers who did computer science, went into backend, and at some point, SPAs happened, single page apps happened, and they found themselves writing business logic in JavaScript. And because people confused the technology with the role, they were called JavaScript developers or UI developers, even though they weren't rendering anything and don't know what they're doing. I mean in the kindest way. They literally have no training. They don't know how to write a UI. And we've also seen, at the same time, the rise of bootcamp training replacing, or at least competing with, universities. So you have people who are going and doing a 12-week course instead of a 3-year course. And they're coming out with essentially quite good juniors. And this is very attractive. It's good for people career changing, that kind of stuff. But again, they don't have the time to teach the fundamentals of everything. So what they usually drop is HTML and CSS. So you get this situation where these gaps happen. You can be pretty sure that university taught people back-end. You can be pretty sure they didn't teach them proper JavaScript. They might have. You can be pretty sure that the boot camps did some level of JavaScript and back-end, but they probably used Bootstrap for everything else. And then everyone turns to tutorials, which are a crapshoot. The only one you truly control is internal training. That's probably not good news, but that's the truth. And it's tempting to really think that because we've now got modern frameworks, we've got React, Angular, Vue, these sorts of things, that these are somehow going to solve this problem. But actually, no. They're just new code. They're not, like, humans are still the same. All the same problems have persisted. And I went through the highly ranked Angular, React, and Vue tutorials. I felt lucky, And they all had some kind of an accessibility clanger in them. Whether it just be something as simple as a missing alt attribute or the clickable div, that kind of stuff. So this problem remains, custom controls and naivety about what they cost and what you really have to do. Because if your entire exposure to learning HTML is go use Bootstrap, you don't know what it's really doing, and you don't know if you have to reproduce something. You're given a task in your new job to go and make a custom control. You don't actually know what to look for. So I'm going to unpack this, because I want to unpack what we refer to as a bit of a fait accompli. We talk about don't click on divs, but what does that really mean? And that's what I'm going to go to here. At a high level, if you just attach a click event to a div and a button, this is sort of the feature set you get. The div, it will work with a mouse because click definitely works. Depending on the device you use, taps might work. Keyboard definitely does not work. Meanwhile, the button, every input you can find works. It tailors its behaviors to the input you're using automatically, and you can disable it just by putting an HTML attribute. So that's a lot for just choosing a different element. But given that the scope of work for a lot of people is to build a custom control, let's look into what does it take to completely reproduce a button with a div. Now, the specification I gave myself for this was to make 2 very large buttons that could be seen easily by an audience at a particular tech conference, and it worked in Chrome. So there are a few cut corners, but it's the amazing Clickertron. This is the most advanced technology you will see this afternoon. It counts clicks. And just to make it a little bit easier to talk about some of the issues around things, you can turn it on and off. That's a fearful amount of functionality, right? And you can see, I'm going to use animated GIFs for this. You can just see an example of the Clickertron in action here. Because I have offended the demo gods in the past, I'm not going to do live code. Quick side trip into application setup. This is a very rough and ready bit of work, by the way. This is not an RA tutorial. And I'll acknowledge up front, this works great in NVDA and is not very usable. It works, but it's not very usable in VoiceOver. I've got a little miniature Lisa Herod on my shoulder going, you made it accessible, not usable. Each of the controls is linked the same way. It's got a RA controls attribute over to a live region. So there's a little bit of boilerplate to do that. I'm not going to dig through JavaScript boilerplate of finding elements, that kind of stuff. Just assume that's there. There is a shared attribute for text size because I knew I was building 2. And yes, I'm just that obsessed with scaling code. And there is a shared function attached to the checkbox. So that's a little bit of setup. You don't really need to know about that. But that's so you know what I'm comparing later on. So let's create the button. It's just a button, 2 attributes. You just need an ID to attach events. That's all. And away it goes. We want to count how many times you clicked on it, so we add an event listener called click, and that's literally it. That's the whole JavaScript. A good side note, why does this work with keyboard? Native controls have a thing called synthetic click events, and if you fire click, it'll work. If you use a keyboard and hit enter, it will know you meant click. It's a synthetic click event. The interactive controls get it. The text ones don't. Because I bumped up the font size, there is one rule in CSS, but realistically, you'd be piling your own design anyway. The toggle is just adding and removing the disabled attribute. That is it. That takes care of styling, takes care of whether the events fire. That's everything you need to do to make that control literally work or not work. And there we have it. It's kind of shocking how little you need to do with native elements. I work in UI libraries, and I'm used to a button being one of the biggest, hardest, longest builds, apart from forms. And when you just go back to what the browser gives you for free, it's kind of sad. You sort of, it's like, oh, this was nice. So let's go on to the div, the real problem of the day. So we create the same relationship with the button, that's normal. We already know that it's going to be pretending to be a button, so we give it an ARIA role of button. Cool, off to a good start. Click counter actually looks the same, and that gets us this far. So it counts clicks, we can interact with it. Don't know what this guy at Alley Camp was on about, this being difficult. Let's slap some style on this puppy and we're in business, right? Okay, let's start. So buttons are inline blocks, so we'll set that. And then I had to decide, what would we call the design? I said, okay, let's just literally reproduce the native control because it's got all the states you've got to think about. Now, realistically, this code would be your brand. And a little side note that Chrome's style sheet for buttons is weird. It's got a lot of stuff going on in there. I, as an experiment, tried copying and pasting it. It didn't work. You actually have to dig into the calculated style, and then you find that there's details like each of the borders is a different color. There's a linear gradient to give sense of depth, and it flips around in different states. So there's a lot going on there. So I've got to reproduce all of that for our div. There's some magic numbers for spacing it out to make it look the same. Don't ask me how they're derived. I just used magic numbers and shipped it. So cool, excellent. Does anyone see the issue we've got? It's a little bit hard to see the clicks in this. So here's the thing I didn't think would be the hardest thing about this presentation. Trying to record animated GIFs that show clicks. I wasted several evenings, and I'm sorry, this is what you're getting now. But if you can sort of see, there's no active state when the div is being clicked. So it works, but you can't tell that it works. So you go back, you add active. And you can just do that in the CSS with the active selector. So that's not too hard. We're doing pretty well here. So cool, now we have an active state. That's great. Looking really, really nice. But we're nowhere near done because you still can't disable it. And the div keeps on counting clicks and it doesn't look disabled. So its younger sibling, the button, is sitting there looking very smug at this point. So we go ahead and we think, well, there's no disabled attribute on a div, so we're going to have to do this ourselves. So I'm going to use ARIA disabled so I can publish that out and make it assistive technology aware of what I'm doing. This is actually really nice for testing, by the way. It's one thing that I do wish HTML5 was better at was a lot of things are the presence or absence of an attribute, and if you've written tests long enough, you know that that's a really crappy test. You really want to have something there in both states. So in my real buttons, I actually still add this. I'm sure I'm not meant to, but at the same time, it saves a tremendous amount of technical debt in our test suite later on. So people can debate me that later over a beer. Disabled style can then be added onto our div buttons when ARIA disabled equals true. We can use, selectors are great. A lot of people haven't revisited selectors if they learned them a long time ago. You can build very powerful things. So now it looks disabled. Problem is, it looks disabled. If you click it, it still fires events. Okay, it's going to take more than a morning. Let's keep going. So now we have to go and write this rather difficult selector where you have ARIA disabled false active, and then you can actually apply the active state only when disabled is false. And yeah, I wrote this the wrong way around the first time. But we're smart, we can get by. JavaScript, however, is still going to fire. So what we've got to do is take our JavaScript and add a check to it so that the event target is now checked for an ARIA disabled attribute, and if it is true, then it won't fire. So maybe hard to read there. It's like, if it's not true, don't do it. Yay, now it's working, or not working, as the case may be. Only 10 extra lines of code. We can probably live with that, plus the style sheet, which we had to do anyway. So, do you reckon we can ship it? I'm glad people are saying no. No, there's Icebergs dead ahead, we can't ship it. I'm going to go straight to one that maybe people didn't pick. Because we're using a text control, the cursor is wrong. And this kind of change, this is probably not the end of the world for users, but this is the sort of stuff I find niggles. Users notice this kind of difference kind of at some sort of subatomic level. Like, they know what a button should do, and there's something grating at the back of their mind. They're not going to get in and write a Jira to you going, hey, you've got the wrong cursor on the button. They'll just know, hey, yeah, buttons are a bit crap. So you have to set this manually in your custom controls. There, better, got the right cursor. It's a good bit of polish. Can we ship it? No. Still an iceberg. We've got the wrong selection behavior. If you click and drag a little bit, now I use a tablet, not a mouse, and so I do this a fair bit because it's actually very hard with a pen to click on one pixel. And if you click and drag, you'll get the selection box and you'll get whatever the color is, in this case the blue. If you click and drag again, you get this strange copy and paste behavior going on. So we've got to do something about that. Thankfully, that's just a line of CSS. User select none, and now your div won't let you select it if you drag a bit on it. So that's another good bit of polish. Ship it? No, I'm seeing lots of no, that's good. No, more icebergs. We still haven't made this work for the keyboard. So, you can't just use it because you can't even get there yet. Now, it may be hard to see in this div, but you can see the blue default outline going from button to the checkbox, totally skipping the div. The div does not exist as far as the keyboard is concerned. I should finish my coffee before the talk. Easy enough to fix. We add tab index of 0. For those who aren't familiar with the nuances of this, 0 just means it's in the tab order, but it's not controlled. That's 99 times out of 10, actually no, 99 out of 100. This is what you do if you're actually messing with tab index. Okay, native JavaScript doesn't let you overload listeners, so I've quickly refactored already because I didn't want to duplicate all of my logic twice. So I've pulled out my clicking to a div counter function, and now I've got a click and a key press. And so, that's all working, and we know now it's going to work with a keyboard. We can get to it and we can click it. Can we ship it now? Still no. More icebergs. There's a lot of icebergs in these waters. We've actually added too much keyboard support. That might sound really strange, but the button knows what to expect. It knows what you mean by a click, but the div doesn't. The div just says, you've pressed a key, any key. And if you watch this, what I'm doing is mashing my keyboard, and I'm just hitting ASDF, and it just counts all of them. That's not good. We know a lot of things have different keystrokes, and we've got a lot of assistive tech. We don't want to get in the way of these things. Right, so we've got to update our JavaScript. So we refine our keyboard event to listen to those particular keystrokes and only fire for those. So now it only responds to the same keystrokes, which is totally obvious from a GIF, but trust me, this is now just working for enter and spacebar. Can we ship it? There's a few nods, you'd think so. Not quite. We've created a problem now. You can disable it, and it looks disabled and doesn't fire events, but because we made it focusable, it is still focusable while it's disabled. And remember, we are making this work just like a button. So what do we do? Okay, the quick fix, the patch, is to just add to our ever-increasing function to add and remove tab index when that checkbox happens. But by this stage, you're thinking about how many buttons you have, and you have to do this individually. So because you're regretting your choices, you want to generalize it now. So you could do this. You could wire it up, and the Clickertron would have worked with this, but I did say we were replicating button exactly. And so let's take that thought of buttons should not be focusable whenever they have this disabled attribute. And so for the div, that's our RA disabled. Can we generalize that? We can. There's a thing called mutation observer. And so you set this up. This is so easy to read. You don't even need to read this code. You'll know it instantly later on. So it listens for DOM mutations, and if that happens to be on an element that's RA disabled, and it's one of our div buttons, and it's got a tab index on it, it will then auto-remove the tab index according to state. Oh, simple. This was actually kind of fun to do, but this is when I was really going, yeah, this is going to be kind of big. So to generalize that, we can just iterate through, use a query selector all for all of our buttons, and we can find them all and deal with them all in one go. So that's great. So now we have a properly disabled div button. Okay, can we ship it yet? No. No. The designers are really, really upset because you sent this for design review, and what happens is when you click it, it gets this big, ugly focus ring. Now, if you click a normal button with a mouse, it does not have a focus ring. And I guarantee 100% your designers will send this one back. So what we now have is the requirement to keep the focus ring if using keyboard, because we must do that, but not apply it if using mouse. This is tricky. There's not something reliable we can do for this. So because I really have had this problem a lot of times, I wrote a plugin. It's just actually a bit of JavaScript. And what it does is track keyboard input, and mouse movement, that kind of thing. And so what we do with this, and there are a few implementations out there that do this. What I'm going to do is publish this information into the DOM as an attribute on the body so that I can then respond to it in other places. So I will have a pretty good idea when someone's using a keyboard or a mouse. It's not foolproof, but it's good enough for this. And then we can go back to an even worse selector than we did before, and we can now remove the focus if the input mode is the mouse and the button has focus. Okay, so now it works. You can go back and forth. It's all good. Can we ship it? Yes. Yes, we can ship it. Whew. Okay. The div doubled the code base. That's the short answer of this. So the CSS went from 3 lines to 25 lines. The JavaScript went from 8 to 43. That's including my library, which I'm counting as 1 line because I minified it. And engineers, this should be the scary slide for you. And QA, it should also be the scary slide for you. But I've been really kind and assumed we found this before we shipped it. In reality, most people ship it when it works with the mouse, and this is what your backlog looks like. So product managers, this is the slide that should scare you. It's essentially going to come through as a massive list of JIRAs, or whatever your ticket system is. Fix this, fix that, users got this, and because you'll get duplicates, it's just sadness. And then you multiply this by every custom control you've got across every platform you have to support and every implementation of your UI library that you've got. Now, it's important to understand vanity controls, they're not evil. They are something we will build. The point of all this is to show you the cost that you're taking on so you can choose wisely. They will take more code to make and maintain, and there's more risks involved. And if you don't know HTML, CSS, you're going to have almost no chance of getting this right. And we see this a lot. Common issues are no keyboard support at all, missing states, the wrong keystrokes. Really good advice here is just play with native elements and work out when the tabs and arrows and things are meant to be happening. It's not actually what you think because you use them too much. And just subtle inconsistencies like the cursors. So I'm coming through to the end. It's okay, Adam, I did see your hand signal. Mistakes have to be addressed throughout your business to steer clear of these icebergs. You have to start early. You've got to actually review what you're recruiting for. You have to put accessibility into it. You have to ask questions. Because of the gap that I mentioned earlier on, if someone says they know front end, you've got to ask them what they mean by that. You've actually got to specifically find out what's the biggest piece of front end they've ever built themselves. And you really have to get this into your requirements documents. Now, this might sound funny. Everyone wants it, but when you really look at it, are you putting it into your specs? Because if you don't ask for it and then require it before you sign off, you're definitely not getting it. And this is so simple, it's easy to forget. And similar to what was discussed before the break, actually, how well is your QA team equipped to test for accessibility? Will they catch these issues? Will they know? And does the design team know what to look for as well? And ultimately, you'll have to have a training strategy because you will have to teach your staff the gaps in their skill set. If you take on grads out of any university in Sydney we have at the moment, or any bootcamp I'm aware of, you will need to teach them HTML and CSS. The thing about that is that you can find good courses online. There are good resources and you can guide people through them. You don't have to become a teacher and trainer, you just have to guide them through that learning, and you have to make sure you give them the time. So I'll leave you with the last thought is, it's up to us to fix the skills gap. No one else is coming. I've been waiting for universities to get better for 20 years. It's not happening. It's up to us. It's not terrible. We just have to get on and do it. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Ben. And that was awesome because you're right on time. So, well, yeah, the content was absolutely great, but I think, you know, he got the good reactions from the audience, so I assumed that was implied from me as well.
It's mostly being on time. Are we doing questions or are we doing changeover?
We're probably doing changeover, but if anyone's got some questions while others are changing over.
Oh, sorry, we've got a mic coming to you. Just one moment, sorry.
Supporting people who are using hearing loops. Here you are.
Thank you. Ben, I just wanted to ask if you had any recommendations for a good tutorial for HTML.
I do. I'm trying to remember the URL, learn.shayhow.com, I think it is. But the best one is actually, if you know Jeremy Keith, he periodically talks about beginner resources, and I'm just cribbing out of his posts. So, but yeah, the Shay Howe resources are really, really good. And the other one is for other web tech. MDN is just an eternally good resource. But the Learn Shay Howe, it's just got a really good curriculum. It takes you through in a good order, and I've been able to give that to a few grads, and they've been able to learn on their own pace pretty well. The other thing I actually do, by the way, is that I should have probably mentioned this. I give this task to our grads. I make them build out a div and a button, and they are guided. Oh yeah, don't feel that you have to sit. If you're changing over, you can run out. You're not going to offend me. So hopefully that's useful. I can share some resources too.
Thanks a lot, Ben.